Hi everyone, my name is Emily Singer Lucio and I'm the ADA coordinator for the University of Maryland. If you've been listening to the ADA podcast, then you know that we typically have a conversation with a member of the UMD community who has a disability. Well, today we are doing something a little different. I've invited members of the UMD DOTS team to talk with us today about everything they are doing on campus to improve access for all individuals with disabilities. I have with me today David Allen, Executive Director of DOTS, and Amanda Scala, Associate Director of DOTS. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those who don't know, could you start out by giving a brief overview of all the things DOTS does?
Sure. I'll start off with parking. Parking is a kind of a vital part of what we do. Everything to do with parking garages, parking registration, which my colleague is responsible for here, and just overall making sure that folks can get their cars in between two white lines.
Sometimes that's not so easy.
No, it isn't sometimes. And then there's, of course, there's Shuttle UM, which has many functions. Our general, most widely known are the big buses that run particular routes around campus. The goal there is to try to pick up as many people as possible. That's our transit buses. And then there's paratransit, where that fills in the gaps where the big buses can't go, and that have lifts that pick up folks with either permanent or temporary disabilities. And Night Ride, which is another on-demand service that kind of takes over when paratransit ends, but it also allows anybody to use them also. That's Night Ride. Then we have charter buses, the big black beautiful buses that we see that go anywhere from Florida to New York to Chicago,
Wow.
taking sometimes our teams or the business school to different locations where education continues. And something that has taken a lot of our time lately is the micromobility world, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's all the scooters, individual transportation devices. And then we have a section in our department that is about sustainability. So we try to make sure that the fewest number of cars that have single occupants are on our campus. So different things like carpools and van pools and incentives to walk and take the bus. That's another major part of our department.
Who knew? I did not know all of
There
that.
you go.
That's great. Awesome. So let's start off, you mentioned, by talking about micromobility, right? Because that's a big issue on campus these days. One of the ongoing challenges we've had is people parking them in ways that block access to individuals with disabilities along ramps or in front of accessible entrances, making it difficult for someone to get to the door or the door opener, the automatic door opener, in front of the door. So what are some of the ways that DOTS is dealing with this, and what more can the UMD community do to help?
So as David mentioned, micromobility encompasses a lot of individual modes of transportation. So that could be anything from a bike to a skateboard. But really what we're talking about are the electric scooters and the electric bicycles, right? That's what people are thinking about. And those are the devices that we're seeing that are causing the most issues for our community. There's been a dramatic increase in the use of these devices on campus. We see students that are using them to commute. If they're parking a vehicle in a farther away lot, they'll use it to commute into core campus. We see students who are living off campus using them to commute onto campus, which gets to David's point about reducing the number of single occupancy vehicles by using these devices. So they do have a benefit in our greater transportation ecosystem.
Sure.
However, when people bring them onto campus and they don't park them properly, they don't follow the rules about where they should and should not be, we start to see a dramatic increase in the number of complaints we receive. We are aware of the impact specifically that these devices pose to the ADA community, those who need to be able to access ramps in and out of buildings, sidewalks, things like that, that the average student might not think about as frequently when they're thinking about where they're going to park these devices. They're supposed to be at bike racks away from sidewalks, away from ramps, but they end up in places where they shouldn't. It's certainly a challenge that we are facing. We've done a lot in terms of education and really focusing on making sure that the individuals who are using these devices on campus have to go through mandatory education that includes an entire module about how to be in compliance with ADA standards across campus.
That's great. So the ADA piece is part of that training.
Absolutely, and
Great.
It's a mandatory training for anyone who registers their device on campus, and all devices have to be registered or they face impounds. Individuals can be fined if they're not registered, but they can also face mandatory fines if they park in a way that impedes ADA access to any building. That includes locking their device to any handrail, blocking an ADA access ramp. Whatever the case may be, there are mechanisms and penalties in place to really discourage that behavior.
Yeah, and it's also a balancing act, right? Because, Amanda, there are people who need micromobility devices for mobility reasons because of a disability, right? And so there are steps you all are taking in terms of that as well, right?
Absolutely. So we do have a process for anybody who needs to use an electric scooter or an electric bike to move around campus because of a medical issue, whether that's injury or illness. They can come to us. We have a form available on our website. They take that form to their physician, and their physician essentially signs off saying that they need this medical access to be able to have this device on campus and to be able to use it for the purpose of moving about campus as a result of their injury or illness. We don't ask for any personal information about what's going on with the individual. It's truly just an authorization, and that's specifically intended for resident students who are otherwise prohibited from bringing these devices onto campus.
Great. It's good to know because I'm not sure everyone knows that. So let's get into other forms of transportation. So UMD has both a bus system and a paratransit system, as David, as you mentioned. For those who are not aware, can you share a little bit of how one or both might be beneficial to individuals with disabilities and how they're different?
Sure. We have 18 individual bus routes, transit bus routes, that cover daytime and nighttime. And they carry more than 1 million people. And each of those buses have an ADA ramp that kind of flops down. The driver will activate them, and it will allow folks with wheelchairs to enter the bus. Now the challenge there, though, is we can't control as well as we'd like the actual bus stop. So because the bus itself is ADA compliant, unfortunately, because of the construction that's on campus that just changes the landscape seemingly daily, the bus stop itself sometimes is not ADA compliant. We would love for people to let us know if they see that on campus and that experience of not having an accessible bus stop, and we can make every effort to talk to our colleagues in FM, facilities management, to try to make that more available, more accessible.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? I think a lot of people think just the bus itself, but it's a two-part thing, right? You have to be able to get to the bus by the bus stop, right? And if you're stopping in an area that's all grass or that's on a hill and maybe not flat or whatever, and so the ramp can't come out properly or whatever, it poses a challenge. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Thanks.
Right, and then there's paratransit, and that takes over where the large transit buses can't go. So folks can, the best situation is when folks, they register in order to use the system, and either register through the health center or ADS, and then they have full access to our paratransit system. And like I mentioned, it's best if folks let us know in advance, maybe many days is the best. We have a certain amount of equipment, but we are able to accommodate on demand also. The service is called on demand, so we try to move in that direction when necessary. And another challenge with even that system is where we're able to stop. We have over 200 places on campus that our paratransit buses can go, the smaller vehicles. And we have a great team that really works to try to provide the best service for folks who use these 200 bus stops and use our paratransit system. But we know that there's a challenge there sometimes, because just like the transit bus, the ramp has to be able to come down, it has to have an appropriate slope that the van can stop, and that they can load the individual. So those are some other challenges sometimes with the ADA process.
Well, that's actually leads into one of the questions I was going to ask. I hear a lot about that concern, right, about the pickup and drop-off locations. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how those pickup and drop-off locations are determined, and if there's a way for individuals to provide feedback to make improvements to that?
Absolutely. We always love to get feedback, especially from these folks. But as I mentioned earlier, because of the construction that happens on campus, those 200 some number of them may have to slide down feet or further in order to not be in the way of a construction project. And anytime there's a problem that folks see, and if they have a suggestion, perhaps this would be a better place to make it a 201 places that they can be picked up. We certainly will take that into consideration. But number one, obviously, is safety. We have to be able to feel comfortable. That great team that we have working in this area, we have to feel comfortable that the equipment can withstand that area, and then any type of person with an ADA need would be able to board the bus.
Great. I want to go back to something else you said too. You were talking about scheduling. Have you made any changes as to how the scheduling works? How do individuals get approved for paratransit, or who is eligible?
Yeah, there's an app that's called Chirp Ride, and it's a couple years old, and it allows it to be kind of like an Uber process, where in the past you actually had to make a phone call and someone took the information and radioed the information to the driver, and the driver picks the person up. Now that with Chirp Ride, we have a device in each vehicle, like a little iPad.
Nice.
So it goes right to them, and they can go pick folks up directly. And then the folks that manage the overall system can really do their best to make sure that there's enough vehicles so the wait time is not too long. There are things, especially like athletic events, that can really get in the way of that.
Yeah, sure.
But we have a dedicated resource to put toward our paratransit system, and it does pretty well, I think.
That's good. And just one other question about that. So they wait a certain period of time until someone before they leave?
Yes,
is that right?
I think it's 15 minutes.
Okay.
It may not even be that long, but there's a certain amount of time before they have to go to the next, because there's a certain amount of buffer in between each ride.
Got it.
If we wait too long, then the next person will be late, and that will cascade throughout the day.
Yeah,
Okay.
the driver is scheduled to arrive before the pickup time and to stay for a period after the pickup time to try to give the individual as much time as possible. But I can't echo what David said enough, that this is a limited resource. We only have so many vehicles, and so where it becomes really helpful for the end user is to schedule those rides in advance. We have students who, once they're approved, they'll schedule every ride specifically with relation to their class schedule.
Yep.
They'll do all of those at once so that they get on the schedule, so that there isn't that question the day of as to whether or not they're going to have a ride. They will know that weeks or months in advance. It becomes more challenging when we have those on-demand requests, and we have to find a driver, we have to find a vehicle, and there could be a case where one isn't available. And so we're trying to do everything that we can to accommodate every request that we receive, but there are times when it's simply not possible. That doesn't mean that we're not trying. It doesn't mean that we don't want to, but we certainly want to make sure that we have the appropriate vehicle available and a driver who's trained to assist that individual.
I would assume one of the things that makes it even more challenging is when either a class gets canceled, or a class gets moved, or a class gets added, or some other event gets added. How do you deal with that? I'm sure that's like all a juggling act, right?
It really is. I think that the team that's responsible for this is constantly working to create a schedule that makes the most sense, and trying to most efficiently and most effectively use the drivers that are assigned to paratransit so that they're able to do multiple runs. So you drop someone off on South Campus, maybe there's somebody in 15 minutes who needs a pickup on South Campus, and trying to use that driver to address both of those needs instead of dispatching someone from our Shuttle UM base to go out and pick up that second individual when that person could be picking up someone from a different sector of campus. So it is a very intricate dance that they are doing over there.
Yeah, well, and it's so important for the individuals using the paratransit to make sure to call those in and notify you guys of changes as soon as possible, right?
Absolutely.
So obviously the other big issue is parking. As changes happen to campus, I hear concerns from individuals with disabilities about how there is little or no ADA parking close to a building, right? Now, I want to be clear about one thing, though. The ADA does not require there to be ADA parking right next to every building. What is required is that there is an accessible entrance, an accessible path of travel, accessible transportation options, and accessible parking when and where parking is currently provided. So if we have a parking lot, that parking lot has to have a certain number of ADA spaces based on the number of total spaces in the lot, right? So being such a large campus, how do you think we balance this need for accessibility within the current system?
So I think that this is an area where we really put a lot of effort, and we are trying to put as much attention towards creating ADA accessible parking in all of the places, because we're out there. We've walked lots with you, Emily, specifically when we hear from campus community members who say, I need to get to this building and there's no ADA parking, or there's no ADA pathway. And even though that falls out of our scope and our area of responsibility, we want to be a part of those conversations, because ultimately the end point, that parking space, is our responsibility. And so we go out, we assess lots. When we hear from campus community members who let us know about issues that they're seeing, we're going to do everything that we can to address that wherever feasible. It's certainly a challenge. The campus has grown. I've been here just over 15 years, and the entire landscape of the campus has really changed. And it's not a problem that's unique to us. When you think about campuses across the country, where do you build new buildings? You build it on the open, available space that you have. And in many cases, that's parking lots. Which then it decreases the overall capacity. It pushes parkers further away from the buildings and the places that they need to be. And so we're constantly assessing the availability of these spaces, and when there are projects that happen, when there are construction projects, whether temporary or long-term, we're taking a look at the inventory and we're saying, okay, this project is going to take 8 ADA spaces offline for 6 weeks, 6 months, or forever, and we're trying to find opportunities to make the next closest available spaces that are ADA compliant into new ADA spaces, so that when we lose one, we gain one, and we try to maintain the same net inventory overall wherever possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that is not unique to this campus, as you mentioned, right? So many campuses are trying to create more pedestrian-friendly, centralized campus zones, right? And then pushing the parking farther out, especially if they're a primarily residential campus, like we are to a great extent, right? And then, I think the challenge is, A, we've got the topography issue, right? That's a big challenge. But, B, I think people are somewhat used to being able to park very close to buildings, so it's hard, right? And I think the other thing is that I totally lost my train of thought, but that's okay. David, you were going to say something.
I was going to say, right, that again, construction is a big part of our challenges with ADA parking. And I will say that Amanda is a mama bear when it comes to sitting with contractors, sitting with facilities management, and saying the next closest spaces need to be ADA, even if it's an unusual situation or it causes service spaces to go away. That's the number one priority. So we really are, in those particular instances, we are very much advocates for having what spaces are left. Like you said, sometimes there's no space nearby, but we are very much advocates for whatever space there may be left, of making sure that they are ADA available and compliant.
Yeah, and I can confirm that, because I've gone out with members of your team and looked at parking lots when we've gotten complaints from people and said, and the response I always get from DOTS is where we can add a space that makes sense, we will do it. And so that's very much appreciated. I think the other thing that's important to know is that there is an opt-in notification service for people who want to be notified of when these changes or when parking lot closures happen. Amanda, do you want to just briefly say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we maintain what we call our ADA listserv. So anytime we become aware of a project that's going to impact ADA parking in any parking lot, along any roadway, anywhere that we have designated ADA spaces, if we become aware of a project that's going to impact those spaces on a short-term or long-term basis, we send that out to everyone who is on this list. Now, it might be in a sector of campus that you never go to, but we want to make sure that you're aware of every change that is happening that might impact your day-to-day decisions with regard to where you go, where you park, or where you may need to park that might be different. And so it's an opt-in listserv. You can reach out to us. You can reach out to us just by emailing us and saying, hey, I'd like to be added to the ADA listserv. Anyone can be added to this listserv. So whether you are somebody who is using an ADA parking space, or you're somebody who works with folks who are, or you're an advocate, or you just want to be in the know about everything that happens with regard to parking, you can opt into this listserv.
That's great.
Hey, Emily?
Yes.
Can I tell you my favorite parking ticket?
Oh, that should be interesting.
My favorite parking ticket is when we are able to identify someone who's using an ADA permit and it's not theirs. It's $500. And there's a bit of a process to prove it, But that's my favorite one, because that's the one that has the biggest effect on, in this particular area of concern, of allowing people who deserve and have the appropriate credential to be able to use it.
I don't think I've ever heard somebody say my favorite parking
That's my
ticket.
favorite.
Of course we have a favorite parking ticket.
Listen, if you live in DC like I do, tickets are like all the time, right, for various things. So yes. Okay. So from what I see, I do believe we're possible, right? We're trying to put ADA parking spaces close to buildings as long as it's on an accessible path to travel, and I think that's what you indicated, right? Do you think there's more we could be doing?
You know, I think that there's always more that we can be doing. Now, do I know what that looks like today? Maybe not. But I think that that's where our desire to engage with the community, the individuals who are most affected by the decisions that we make, that's where that comes into play most. Like, we need to hear from people, because I can go out and I can survey a parking lot and I can try to make that determination of where the need might be, but I don't know an individual's daily routine. I don't know where they're going next. I don't know where they're coming from. And so hearing that anecdotal information is really helpful when we're making decisions. I think that there's a lot that can be done to make sure that the pathways from parking areas to facilities stays in line, because we can create ADA parking spaces, but as you've mentioned, it's that pathway that is part of the compliance. There need to be designated crosswalks. There need to be compliant sidewalks. I can't just put a parking space somewhere because it's really close to a building if there's no compliant pathway for an individual to actually use that space. And so there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration across multiple units, and to use the feedback that we get from campus partners and from campus community members to really improve. And I think that continuous improvement is something that we as an organization are really committed to and are open to and want to hear that feedback. If you've had a bad experience, tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're none of us are perfect, right? And there was a mistake recently that we got cleared up pretty quickly, right? There's a new bike path along behind Taws Hall and all that area, right? And I forget what parking lot that is, but the one back there by where they're
by JJ3.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so they moved the parking spaces a row back, the ADA parking spaces a row back, right? And then they added some more on the other side, but then they put up a chain link fence along the path, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the bikes and the pedestrians, right? And unfortunately, there was still chain link fence at the crossing area for the spaces to walk, so they could walk across. And we got a complaint about that. I let you guys know, right? And we fixed it, right? So obviously we want to do the right thing, and unfortunately sometimes there's miscommunications and things happen. But I think it's important to know that if people come across those things, to let us know, and our goal is to try and fix them as quickly as possible, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you think we're doing in regard to the number of ADA spaces in each lot? I know we talked about that a minute ago in terms of the fact that you guys are always willing to evaluate that. And I know there's been assessments or in process of assessments to determine where we are exactly and how many ADA spaces. And I don't think people always realize that the number of ADA spaces in a lot is based on the total number of spaces in that lot. But I think for the most part, we are over that in many of our lots, aren't we?
In most of our locations, we are over that. So compliance is the minimum goal for us. So we want to make sure that we're compliant in all of our areas, but wherever possible, we want to be and exceed compliance and to add additional spaces. A couple of things that we've done in recent years with the arrival of the Purple Line, we lost a number of ADA spaces, core campus, along Campus Drive. And so we actually took an entire parking lot that is kind of behind the stamp, lot BB, and that used to be a faculty staff permit holder parking lot. And we converted it to 100% ADA. Now there's still some state and service spaces in the non-ADA compliant locations within that lot, but we've tried to add additional capacity where possible. Now it's not on the same side of the building. There are certainly, issues with the location itself, but in terms of trying to take permit holder spaces offline and really create dedicated spaces for individuals who have that need, we're really trying to do so. We recently made retrofit modifications to the entryway to Union Lane Garage to make sure that individuals who are accessing those ADA spaces have that ADA pathway to be able to get across the rest of the garage to be able to get into the stamp. So like I said, I think compliance is the bare minimum for us, and we really try to go above and beyond and to do what we can to make sure that we are providing as much access and as many access opportunities to the campus community as we can.
Yeah, I remember our discussions about the Union Landing Garage, and I was so pleased when that was done, because now the spaces have like a cutout, and you can actually get to the pay station and you can get to the curb cut, and then we worked with FM to get the other curb cut across the street. So yes, that's been a very
It's all about working together.
It's all about working together. Yeah, it's been great.
You know, going off of what Amanda just said, we have parking lots, 400 space parking lots that are nowhere near buildings. So we don't concentrate on those as much as the ones that, like Amanda was just talking about, where we can take an entire parking lot and make it a fully ADA, every space being ADA. We've done that a couple of times in the last several years. So we hope that folks see that, and we want them to be used.
Yeah, and I know recently there was work done on Regent's Garage, right? And so there were some spaces taken offline, but I know you guys tried as hard as you could to keep as many ADA spaces through that process, right? So I think that's really helpful. If people have, sorry, to question. What are some of the biggest challenges you see with ensuring transportation access across campus?
You know, we've said construction a lot.
Yeah. And
that's the first place my mind goes. It's just that the landscape changes so much. Now, the Purple Line is looking like it's that major construction is over. And Zupnik and some other buildings on campus are starting to wrap up. So maybe when we do this next year, I won't have that the construction side of things as the biggest challenge. So let's say the construction is fixed. That's big. But
there's always going to be construction.
Construction's good. You know, campus growth is important to the future health of the institution, but it certainly presents challenges in the moment for all of us, right?
It is.
Yeah, but I think that as is often the case, I think we need to do better at communicating the current situation on the ground for folks when it comes to walkways. We as a campus, walkways, ADA parking, and how it all goes together with the paratransit. If there was one place that someone could go and have all that information in one place, that would be something. Well,
there is the accessibility website that links to everything all in one place, so I can put a plug in for that.
Okay.
I think the other thing that's important to know is that like the ADA notifications that you talked about, Amanda, FM also has a notification system too, and so when there is construction on campus or an outage or some other thing, they have an opt-in notification system too, and at the bottom of every one of those notifications all across the board, there is a statement on there that says if you have a disability that impacts your ability to maneuver on campus, or I forget exactly the wording of it, here's a point of contact to call or reach out to, right? Because we realize that all this construction, all of the different changes are happening around campus, whether it be to parking, whether to buildings, to sidewalks, really impact everything. And I think DOTS is hit by this from so many directions, right? Because if there's a construction project, then can the bus go down the street? Can the paratransit shuttle get down that driveway or whatever, right? Are the accessible entrances still available? Is there an accessible crosswalk or path of travel? So all of those things sort of play in together. And so I think, as you mentioned multiple times, and I would agree, it's important that we all work together, which I know we do. So that's good. So if people have additional questions or concerns related to parking and transportation, where should they go?
So there are a number of ways that we accept feedback, which is basically every way you can imagine. So go to our website. You can certainly check out all of our policies, all of our procedures. You can get more information on paratransit and registering. You can look at the parking rules and regulations. Follow us on Instagram. _UMD.
And it's cool.
It's really cool.
We've
got a great team that's running our marketing, our social media, all of our communications, and they're doing a lot of really good work. You can DM us. That way, if you come across something and you just want to DM us a message through Instagram, you can email us transportation@umd.edu, or give us a call. If you're on campus, it's 4 dots. And that phone number will go to our phone call center, and they're there from 8:15 in the morning till 4:15 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. Every day you'll be greeted with an actual human voice to talk to, and they can take those concerns. Or if you want to speak to somebody specific, you can just request to either be transferred to somebody or to be directed to whoever you need to talk to about your specific concerns. So there are a lot of ways to reach us. We try to be as open and available for feedback as possible.
And there's also the micromobility reporting form, right? So if somebody sees a micromobility device parked improperly along a ramp or blocking an entrance, so they should never be tied to a ramp, right? Never be locked to a ramp. Never be blocking an ADA entrance or any entrance for that matter, or the automatic door opener. But if somebody sees that, there is a link to a form. I think it's on your website, but it's also on the ADA accessibility website, where they can report that. And you have a team of people who will go out and check that out, right?
Yeah, and we would actually encourage folks to use the UMD app and to report any instances. I actually reported one on our walkover. So if you can just go through the UMD app and report that, it helps to track for data purposes so that we know how many instances we're seeing, but that's whether you see a scooter that's just left in the middle of the sidewalk, one that's thrown out in the middle of the mall, or one that's locked to an ADA ramp. And the notifications will go to our team. They will go to our third-party contractor who manages the rental fleet. And our goal is to really make sure that there is a high degree of responsiveness.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention the app, so I'm glad you did that. And by the way, those scooters that are just randomly put in the middle of sidewalks, those are actually obstruction too for individuals, especially with mobility challenges. Yeah. Are there any other final thoughts you want to share with us?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I've worked here for a long time and never had this access. It's great.
We love having you.
You're right.
And we're happy to have you again next year when you have more to report.
Okay. But I would say that, as Amanda said, don't be shy in contacting us. We're not, we don't bite. We answer our phones, and we are at work every day.
Good news or bad news, right?
That's right.
We'll take it all.
Yeah, we'll take it all. And a lot of both of our schedules, our calendars, are students that either have concern or have, this person really did a great job. I wanted to tell you about it. So we're accessible. That's something if that's the last word, that's what I would want people to know.
I appreciate that. I'm actually going to throw one other thing out there really quick, because there was another change earlier this year.
Sure.
About the handicap parking spaces for people who do not have a campus parking permit. Amanda, can you touch base on that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the years, we have noticed that individuals were using the ADA spaces as a mechanism to obtain free parking. And so individuals might use their grandmother's ADA placard, or a friend or a spouse. Regardless, there was a degree of fraud that we were aware of that was taking place solely for the purpose of accessing free parking, not parking that someone actually needed. And so we kind of put our heads together to try to think through what's the best way to address this, but to also solve a separate issue, which is that we didn't really have a mechanism for visitors to obtain access appropriately to all of the ADA spaces. So if you're a resident student living on North Campus and your grandfather's coming to visit and needs accessible parking, where are they supposed to park? Because the signs say you have to have a permit, and they can't get a permit. And so what we've done, we have taken on an initiative to update the signage on every ADA parking space on campus to indicate that individuals must either have a campus parking permit, any campus parking permit, but they must have a campus parking permit, or they must pay the hourly parking rate. And on campus, that's $4 an hour. So it means that anyone who's using those spaces is now paying for parking, and it kind of closes that loophole for that opportunity for fraud that we were seeing previously. And so when you approach an ADA parking space now, you will see the standard ADA parking sign indicating that you have to have your state issued credentials, but you're also going to see an addendum that says you must have a campus parking permit or you must pay to park. And there's a QR code on that sign that will take you directly to a payment processor, or it also gives you the Park Mobile zone number so that you can just pull it up on your app and you can pay. So whether you have the app or not, it gives a mechanism for anyone coming to campus to be able to access and park in those spaces without fear of getting a parking ticket.
I am actually so excited about this because I think we had so many people complain that there's never available ADA parking places, and it may have been because of inappropriate usage of it. I don't want to say that for sure, but it's a possibility, right? But now that there's a sort of a checks and balances, I think we have a much better handle on who's parking there and making sure that it's people who really need those spaces. So thank you so much for doing that. David, I'm sorry I took away your last word, but thank you so much for coming today. I'm really excited for you all, and I appreciate you sharing the information. I do hope that this conversation opens people's eyes to accessibility on campus. For more information about resources at UMD about disability, please go to our accessibility website at accessibility.umd.edu, where there are links to the DOTS information that was mentioned today. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.